Okay, I'm down. You got nervous, man. You got nervous, man. Okay, I'm down.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Katie Halper Show. We have a great show in store for you tonight. We have guests from the United States. We have guests from Argentina/Aruba. Before we bring those guests on, though, I do want to encourage everyone to please like the stream, give it a thumbs up. That's a great free way for you to support the show and for you to help us beat algorithmic suppression, which is real. Also, please subscribe if you haven't already subscribed. And to do that, you just hit the subscribe button and then the bell. That way you won't miss any streams that we do, including streams that are not at our normal time, because we've been starting to do that so we can have on more international guests, because 7 p.m. in New York City time is not that convenient for people who live in Europe or the Middle East. Also, if you can, please become Patreon supporters at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. And you will be able to know that you are making the show happen. We literally couldn't do the show without the support of our Patreon supporters. So thank you so much to those of you who support us. For $1 a month, you get to know that you are supporting the show. For $5 a month, you get extra content, extended interviews, bonus interviews. So give yourself that gift, please. We are loving that we're almost at 350,000 subscribers. So thank you to everyone who's already subscribed. Keep it going. So on tonight's show, I'm going to first be speaking to Arturo Desimone, who is an Aruban Argentine writer, poet, and visual artist. And he's going to talk about the scandals of NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who's now probably most famous, at least within the United States, for calling Trump daddy. Then we're going to talk to Ken McCarthy, who is the author of JFK and RFK's Secret Battle Against Zionist Extremism, the documentary Evidence, and John F. Kennedy, Anti-Imperialist, His Character and Intentions Revealed in 5 Speeches and 1 Telegram. So without any further ado, we're going to bring on Arturo Desimone. And also, just a reminder that to see the full show from tonight, so both extended interviews, you can do that at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Here is Arturo. Welcome, Arturo Desimone. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me, Katie.
Of course. You are someone who grew up in a combination of Aruba and Argentina. You have also lived in the Netherlands, and you are a writer and poet and polyglot. And you have a forthcoming piece that is fascinating about Mark Rutte, who is the former Prime Minister of the Netherlands, and also, very significantly, currently Secretary General of NATO. And he made headlines recently because he had an interesting interaction with Donald Trump, in which he called Donald Trump daddy.
They're not going to be fighting each other. They've had it. They've had a big fight, like 2 kids in a schoolyard. You know, they fight like hell. You can't stop them. Let them fight for about 2-3 minutes. Then it's easy to stop them.
And then daddy has to sometimes use strong language.
Like every once in a while, you have to use a certain word.
So tell us about Mark Rutte and tell us about what this interaction represents to you.
Well, other than that, he has unresolved Oedipus complexes.
Oedipus complex, yeah.
Yeah, what it represents. Well, it's not surprising that he's very sycophantic to whoever's in charge in the White House, no matter who it is, because this is, he's one thing about Mark Rutte is that he does not change during his 10 years as the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. More than 10 years, sorry. He was the longest serving Prime Minister of the Netherlands. And when he was not in politics, he worked in the human resources for a big conglomerate called Unilever, where he was a human resources hack. He has always had the same patterns in his politics, in his life. And one of these is of obeisance, sycophancy to the United States, wanting to, for example, participate in the operations in Iraq and Syria. Operation Inherent Resolve was one in which the Netherlands tried to aid the United States, somewhat delusionally, because the United States does not need help from the Netherlands. It was very similar to what happened with George W. Bush, right? So in the Netherlands, many people in the ruling elites, they have a fantasy. They have fantasies that because the Netherlands once had an empire. And nobody remembers it today. Of course, they did, now it's more often acknowledged that they played a very crucial role in the development of transatlantic slavery as a route, as an industry, but very rarely do people remember that the Netherlands had Indonesia and many colonies and part of South and New York, formerly New Amsterdam. And so I think people in the Dutch ruling elites are a bit giddy and delusional sometimes, where they want to participate in what America is doing, because they want to feel that they are still what they once were for that very brief lapse of glory. And they always are sometimes groping for souvenirs of that time. And so the Netherlands became an eager member of George W. Bush's coalition of the willing, with Rutte's predecessor. The Netherlands then rushed to join Operation Inherent Resolve, designed to combat ISIS or Daesh across the Middle East. Of course, they had some motivation to do that because there was an abnormally large number of recruits to ISIS and Daesh coming from the Netherlands and getting lost, or finding their promised land of the caliphate in Iraq and in Syria. And Rutte eagerly participated in that, which led to a big crisis for the Netherlands, in which Dutch Royal Air Forces, after receiving faulty intelligence, allegedly bombed a civilian area and killed around at least 70 civilians, many of whom were refugees, internal refugees who were fleeing ISIS and Daesh. And so they were aiming for an ISIS car bomb factory, but around the corner, there were many, many civilians who were destroyed. And of course, now with what happens in Gaza, there's a massacre every day.
Right.
And so we should wonder, well, does that affect me? Is that relevant? Of course, it remained an open wound for not only for the victims, who began to form a commission, but also for the Netherlands, because it led to a cover-up. So crucial evidence was withdrawn or altered by Mark Rutte's Minister of Defense, who was very loyal to him, covering for him. At some points, they contradicted each other. He said that, when the proverbial shit hit the fan years later, it began to be investigated a year after it happened, and then it began to enter public discussion in 2019. And then Rutte was caught lying, because he said he'd never heard about this. Then his defense minister said she was rather certain that she had sent him the information. She had reported this incident. And so that was, of course, a melodrama that happened a lot throughout the cabinets of Rutte. And somehow these things always memory holds. First, he says that actually he forgot, and then the public moves on. But recently, new evidence was revealed in 2025. Just recently. They found in a military base in the Netherlands footage on a computer showing a video of the bombing and what happened. And perhaps what's in the video that has yet to be discussed. The new defense minister is outraged about this because it was very clearly, the Netherlands and its military are very well organized. The Netherlands is famous for its infrastructure, its order, it has no mountains, no forests. It's a big Mondrian painting. It's, you can't, that was one of the big problems of the Jews in the Second World War, that everything was so well administrated and organized.
It's hard to hide.
Yeah, yeah. My own mother registered me as a Catholic in the census for that reason, even though we were Jewish, because the census is how they got the Jews.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah,
that many years later, she did that.
yeah, yeah. It remains in the back of one's mind, I guess, the census papers, because I mean, she herself, she studied in the Netherlands. Her friends were Dutch Jewish ladies. But I mean, I don't mean to change the topic to my
No, but
mother
that's really interesting.
the
I
way
mean, it's all
Rutte.
related. It's all related because we're talking about Gaza and we're talking
Mm,
about, the
absolutely,
Holocaust
yeah,
and whatever. Yeah. And and we've spoken
yeah.
about this. You are helping me actually. You've helped me already locate survivors who are speaking out against the genocide in Gaza.
Yeah, I'm very glad that you asked me, because I thought this is impossible, because I'm
Yeah.
sure they're no longer alive. But then I'm finding them, and so
And is your mom, I mean, feel
no,
free to say next question.
yeah,
Does she have your politics about Israel, Palestine?
no, absolutely not. This is just
She's a
no.
Zionist. She's like a traditional Zionist,
Uh,
liberal Zionist, maybe.
sure, it was part of our family history. I
Okay.
mean, my grandfather's sister actually studied agronomy in Poland, and as a very young girl, she went to Palestine to live on a kibbutz. So it was hard not to admire that. I think she was also in the Warsaw Ghetto before then. So Zion, yeah, it's like most Jewish families have been rather warm towards Zionist,
Yeah.
folklore and Zionist history.
What was
But
your aha moment when you started doubting Zionist mythology?
the aha moment,
Or was it
well,
gradual?
it
And then we'll go
wasn't.
back to Rutte, but this is interesting. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't extremely gradual. I mean, as a kid, I wondered, me, genetics in Palestine, I doubt it. I thought maybe somewhere else in the east between Europe and Asia, certainly, I mean, the Ashkenazi side of the family came from something that was certainly not fully European, but Palestine, I don't think so. But I never had a problem, or I never had any moral issue with Zionism until the Lebanon War, the second Lebanon War. And I began to read about it a lot more intensely. And I read a book by an Israeli journalist called Founders and Sons, which detailed like the whole ideological origins and how these people thought. And then I started to read. I read Edward Said, and I read a lot of Palestinian poets and Arab writers. And then when I was living in the Netherlands, I mean, there were many Arab communities in the Caribbean where I grew up, but in the Caribbean and South America, the Arab Christians or not only Christians, but just the Lebanese and Palestinians and Syrians are extremely well integrated to the point where Jews stand out a lot more in Latin America.
Interesting.
And so I was never conscious really of that conflict. But in Europe, it didn't seem like there were any inroads for immigrants to integrate, certainly not in the north of Europe. And so all these societal issues and debates, and the fact that the war was raging, got me more interested in the conflicts and in the Middle Eastern and the Arab experience of this conflict,
Wow.
or,
Well,
or occupation, or drama,
right,
or
right.
whatever you
We
want
don't
to
call
call
it
it.
conflict. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Wow, that was a very Jewish discursion that I took us on. While you were talking about the Netherlands, that's very funny because we
About
were
being
talking about
well
the Netherlands.
organized.
Yeah,
Well
exactly.
organized.
Right. Yeah. So the Netherlands are well organized. You're registered as a Catholic. Good to know. And okay, so well organized. So what has this footage been released, or we just know it's been discovered? Has it been published?
It's just been discovered.
Okay.
There's been like an oops moment, and it is. I don't know if it's embarrassing to Rutte, because I think by now he's how do you say, he's reached, how do you say in baseball, you reach the base where no one can touch you anymore. I mean, he's Secretary General of NATO now in the
Right.
Trump era. So the evidence was only became available or leaked when I don't know if that will be able to unseat him. That would maybe be naive. I hope something comes along that unseats him, because he has a great succession of scandals,
Right.
some of which are military in nature. And even the ones that are not military in nature, whenever such a scandal floated to the surface, he had the exact same method of reacting to it. First, he tried to do a cover-up. He tried to pressure, to almost persecute people who were close to the information. Then he would pretend that his own personal interests are actually interests of the Dutch state. And I think now that he's Secretary General of NATO, he'll pretend that his own personal interests are actually security interests of Europe and of the NATO alliance. He always has handled things the same way. Then, if the evidence becomes too much for him to keep hiding, he has always the same, not the same, but a similar set of fall guys, of patsies, as Lee Harvey Oswald called himself. And then he makes a groveling apology to the public where he suddenly shows his emotional side. He performs it in a very infantile manner, like a schoolboy who's been caught masturbating or whatever. And he apologizes to the public. Other politicians apologize for their sex scandals or affairs, but he's never had any. He's known to have a celibate lifestyle, or rumored to be an asexual or whatever. So his scandals are much more complex because they're not of that kind of predictable sort. And there are many of them, a great many of them.
So I guess you could say that given his experience with war crimes, we shouldn't be surprised that he is defending the United States and Israel together are doing in Iran. Let's take a listen to this clip.
My biggest fear would be for Iran to own and be able to use and deploy a nuclear weapon. It will be a stranglehold on Israel, on the whole region and other parts of the world. And that is why NATO has said Iran should not, and this is a consistent position of NATO, Iran should not have its hands on a nuclear weapon. So, and I would not agree that this is against international law what the US did. Let's focus on the essentials here.
Okay, so somehow it's not doesn't violate international law. I mean, I don't know how you can say that, but with a straight face. But I guess, I mean, it makes sense, right? He's lied before about these war crimes and international law, flagrant violations of international law. So maybe that's kind of his lane.
Yeah, Rutte has like maybe three faces. There's a characteristic grin, then there's the straight face, then there's the I'm sorry face, where he apologizes on a talk show after some scandal. But I don't have access into the mind or the brain of Rutte, and I might not want that. It might be scary, but I'm not sure, if Rutte believes what he's actually saying, which is, I suppose, maybe the only way to believe that is if the biases about the Iranians are so cartoonish that, you can listen to them talk about being in the non-proliferation treaty. You can look at the facts of that what was destroyed here was the legitimacy and the credibility of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty, which was generally seen as a rare success in the world and in international diplomacy. The NPT was a rather popular policy around the world and was regarded as rather successful, given that the Cold War instilled certain fears of the bomb in people. And, whatever was not achieved with the destruction of Libya has now really been achieved. The NPT, it has lost a lot of its credibility among the countries of the world that are afraid of regime change, of being attacked, because in Iran, whether or not it is true, I don't mean to, I cannot get into a debate with Rafael Grossi on this, although he's a diplomat. He's not specifically a nuclear scientist, the head of the International Atomic Agency, I mean. But Iran went through greater lengths than many countries to at least be open to the inspectors and so if Rutte is aware of the fact that what what happens with the dropping the bunker buster on Fordow and other places, if he's aware of the fact that what was destroyed or at least damaged beyond, recovery anytime soon was the actual NPT, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or if he's not aware of it, the effect is more or less the same. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy because now Iran desperately will want perhaps a nuclear weapon to
Right, of
develop
course.
one.
Why wouldn't they?
And
Yeah.
and once Iran has it, Saudi Arabia will have it. Once Saudi Arabia has it, Egypt will have it, and so on. And that will spiral until then NATO as a nuclear alliance becomes increasingly solidified in the minds of its members as something that you have to be in for your security, because now more and more people in the Middle East, in the third world, have a nuclear weapon or want one. So it's
Right.
a self-perpetuating angst with NATO. Yeah.
Right. Speaking of Trump and Rutte, here is a message that Trump posted on Truth Social, and it's a text. So he published a private, ostensibly private text message from Rutte where he says, "Mr. President, dear Donald, congratulations and thank you for your decisive action in Iran. That was truly extraordinary and something no one else dared to do. It makes us all safer. You are flying into another big success in The Hague this evening. It was not easy, but we've got them all signed into 5%. Donald, you have driven us to a really, really important moment for America and Europe and the world. You will achieve something no American president in decades could get done. Europe is going to pay in a big way, as they should, and it will be your win. Safe travels and see you at His Majesty's dinner." Mark Rutte. Can you explain what he's referring to, making Europe pay in a big way, and what Trump has managed to achieve? So embarrassing.
The 5% is 5% of GDP. So all governments have 10 years to raise their spending on NATO
Right.
to 5% of gross domestic product.
And that's what Rutte is thankful to Trump for, right? Making Europe pay in a big way.
Yeah. On the one hand, he's very pleased about that because his core mission in political life is austerity. On the other hand, he knows how to write a letter that will be very pleasing to Trump, because he's one of these people who have this sociopathic talent to tell such people, they size them up and they tell them what they want to hear.
Right.
And so,
in fact, we have a clip of Rutte being asked how he felt about the fact that Trump posted a text from him on Truth Social. So let's take a listen.
Without his permission, without
his permission. Right,
yeah,
right. Although who knows? Maybe maybe this was all planned. You never know.
Yeah.
Okay, let us now take a look at this.
I think it's Trump's motivation to publish a private conversation.
I don't know, but I have absolutely no problem with that, because there's nothing in it which had to stay secret.
And what do you say about allegations that you're trying to please Donald Trump a little bit too much?
But look what is inside my text message to him. When it comes to the 2%, delivering 2%, without him, it would never have happened this year. Let's be honest. Beginning of this year, 7 countries were saying, well, maybe somewhere in 2031, 2032. All these 7, 8 countries are now 2%. And when it comes to the 5%, we have to do this because of the capability targets. We have to keep ourselves safe from the Russians. But the good news is that it's also equalizing what we are spending here in Europe and Canada with what the US is spending.
Is this a bit humiliating to have to explain this exchange with your allies, isn't it?
No, absolutely no problem. No, there is nothing in it which had to stay secret. No, thank you.
But shouldn't it be a NATO victory more than a Trump victory?
It's both.
But why did you not say both to the president?
Well, he knows, but I mean, without him, he would never have reached 2% this year. Never, forget it. And then when it comes to the 5% and the new spending target, of course, we have to do it because of keeping ourselves safe here. But do you really think, if Donald not have been president, that tomorrow he would get to the 5%? Are you really thinking that? I'm not. Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, what's so amazing about that is they keep giving him like chance after chance to prove that he's not just, blowing smoke up Trump's ass. There are other words with blowing that you could use, other phrases, but they give him every chance to say, oh, no, this is, of course, about NATO. And this is an accomplishment of NATO and cooperation. But no, he keeps deferring to Trump. It's like, it's really pathetic.
I think there are multiple things going on here. There's the great game that Rutte plays in politics, and then there's the psychological part.
Right.
But let's talk about the great political game that this is about is austerity.
Right.
So Rutte is like the champion of austerity, and this was his job as prime minister of the Netherlands, not only in the austerity that he championed in the Netherlands, which was famous around the world, for its generous social programs, its generous social network. It was a rare thing to see a genuinely homeless person in the Netherlands. The Netherlands had some of the best healthcare, mental health care. There was enormous funding for culture, for arts. And Rutte is the one who took an axe to that and put an end to that era. Like one of his ministers of culture would also pose with an axe, just like Elon Musk posed with the chainsaw, Javier Milei with the chainsaw. So the people who want a lot of austerity, they like these metaphors of the axe, the chainsaw, something a bit martial. Because of course, when there's a war, that's of course the best excuse to cut everything other than arms industries and the security and defense sector, right? So that's really what this is about. And Rutte, not only did he put an end to that era of social democracy in the Netherlands, and he sent, the Netherlands into some kind of post-democracy where all there is austerity, but he did that for Europe, for the entire European Union. So there were a couple of figures who were major disruptors in the European Union. Mark Rutte, Angela Merkel, maybe in a different way, Orban, and the British, who are always, ramming policies down the throats of the Europeans, but not tying themselves to any of the, like they didn't want to be in the currency union because it wouldn't work for them. So these figures were always disrupting this supposedly communal project of the European Union. And I guess because that generation of political leaders, they are technocrats and they are managers. They don't have, either they went along with it if it benefited them because of corruption, or there was just no real opposition. For a while, there was the opposition from Podemos in Spain, but they weren't strategically tough and ruthless enough to face such an enemy. And then there was Varoufakis, who's a good orator, but in my opinion, not a good political strategist. But so these people tore up Europe as a communal project and made it all about austerity. And everything is an excuse for more austerity measures. Everything, including COVID.
We're Giannis positive on this show, but you can express your criticism. Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
I like him I like his way of expressing himself.
Yeah,
it's a constructive criticism, right? But in any case, there was nothing that Rutte was not able to transform into an excuse for more austerity, and he would always do this by any means necessary. It's a bottomless pit. And so with COVID-19, for example, which we all want to forget, the countries that had the most deaths the soonest and therefore imposed the harshest lockdowns and had the harshest economic crises, Spain, Italy, Portugal, when the European Union had proposed COVID relief for them of around more than 700 billion euros, Rutte took the discussions hostage because he wanted to turn this into austerity. So he wanted to say, first of all, this money cannot be a grant, it must be a loan. And whether it is a loan or a grant, the conditions for these countries to accept this money after COVID is that they have to sign their agreement to more neoliberal reforms, more privatization. And he kept using the language that was used by the Germans in 2014, 2015, language even they came to regret when they were describing the Greeks in these rather racist terms as lazy, as swinish, as being, scapegoats for all of this because they were so corrupt and lazy, and that's why you have to cut the pensions of old Greek people. And so he was using this language, but as if these countries were somehow responsible for COVID, right? And I mean, this was the language of the blame game after the European financial crisis. So his motto is austerity by any means.
And so-
and NATO is for him the greatest possibility, for the greatest push in history for austerity, because how do you get the 5%? It implies slashing pensions.
Right.
It implies lowering the minimum wage. It means that a government like that of Sanchez in Spain, who has, rather lukewarm progressive social policies, that he cannot govern because his entire political program is cancelled, because you can't have that program and pay the 5%, right? Rebuilding education, everything goes down the drain to meet the 5%. And that's the goal of Rutte, is this end of politics where everything is administrative, everything is technical. It doesn't matter whether you voted for fascists or for communists, whether you voted for Syriza or whether you voted for
golden whatever.
whatever,
What's the golden
or
dawn?
or
Yeah.
whether you vote for the far right or the far
Right.
left of any country in Europe, the populists especially, the populist right, the populist left, in Italy, wherever, all that matters is this administrative decision that is completely undemocratic, and you get bludgeoned into it. And so now Rutte does it by exaggerating the existential threat posed by Russia. He was once the greatest friend of Putin. There are many pictures of him. I couldn't find them, but I've seen them, of him welcoming Putin and Berlusconi with open arms. Now Putin is the devil because, of course, the existential threat has to be exaggerated, and diplomacy has to be seen as to be, declared dead, to be buried alive, because, of course, this push for rearmament, which is especially of concern in the case of Germany, right? And the German Bundeswehr is already, they're already very reactionary. They're very well armed. Because Merkel and Ursula von der Leyen as Minister of Defense, they already, before any of this, before Ursula von der Leyen became president of the EU, they were pushing very aggressively for the German arsenal to be rebuilt for a kind of rearmament, not the Nazi rearmament, but a rearmament. And so we should be concerned of this, right?
And to see that full interview with Arturo, including a fascinating discussion about the relationship between NATO and the overthrow of Assad in Syria, please go to patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. And now for my interview with Ken McCarthy on Israel and nuclear weapons and JFK. So excited to be talking to Ken McCarthy, who is a JFK researcher who focuses on the relationship between JFK and Israel. And as you'll shortly see, this is extremely relevant, not just to history, but to where we are today. So welcome, Ken.
Thanks for having me, Katie.
So tell people why this isn't just about history, why this has an impact on what Israel is doing literally as we speak.
Well, two things. One of the reasons the reason Israel is able to do what it's doing right now is, number one, they have nuclear weapons. And related to that, they get endless support from the United States. The second thing is they are allowed to lobby in the United States in any way they want. They're the only country allowed to do that on Earth. That's the pillar of the genocide. You take those two pillars away, and the genocide stops now.
Right, exactly. So as you just mentioned, Israel does have nuclear weapons. They have not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and are not part of the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Right.
They have free reign, obviously, but at the same time, they don't officially have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, so it's the people advising the Zionists, which I think includes people in the CIA, are very clever. And this was a great construction. Do they have them? Do they not have them?
Right. And yeah, now you have the entire world talking about the threat of nuclear weapons from Iran, which doesn't have them. and you have them doing this basically at the behest of the country that does have them but claims not to.
Yep, Alice in Wonderland world, which, but by the way, constructed very precisely and very particularly, and they did a great job.
Yeah,
it's the same. It's the same thing that if you don't support Israel, you're anti-Semitic. It's the same construction. It brilliantly conceived, brilliantly executed. And by the way, I want to say one of the things that we have to say this on every show, and you're one of the leaders of this. Zionism is not Judaism. Judaism is not Zionism.
right.
And that we got to, we can't do enough to untangle that knot.
Yeah, it's such a perfect, speaking of nuclear weapons, it's really a great weapon. It's a weapon of mass destruction, honestly. Actually, I just thought of that in real time. I just realized that it is that, because what Israel's doing right now is a genocide. And part of the reason that they're able to do that is because they hide behind the anti-Semitism argument, and they hide behind the Holocaust. And, I actually always knew, I mean, everyone knows who follows this, how much Israel exploits the Holocaust and exploits anti-Semitism. But this is a kind of another conversation. But just an interesting side note is that, as you know, I'm making this documentary about Holocaust survivors speaking out against the genocide. And I didn't know until I looked into this that not only did they exploit the Holocaust, but they were terrible to survivors, the very survivors on whose behalf they claim to act. So when the survivors got in quotes, because you'll see who got them really, reparations from Germany, they didn't get them. It was the Israeli government who got them. They lived in poverty for the most part in Israel. And they even had a slur for them, sapon, which is Hebrew for soap. And that was a reference to, I mean, it's a myth. It's not true, but that doesn't matter. For all intents and purposes, people thought it was true. And either way, they were using it as a slur. That was a reference to the claim that, the Nazis made soap out of Jews, out of their bodies. So this is a country that claims to be never again. Never again is now. We can't allow another Holocaust. We're going to protect the Jews, which we know that they don't. Just look at the way they are dealing with the hostages. That actually smeared Holocaust survivors. Yeah,
and if you showed up in Israel speaking Yiddish, God help you.
Yeah,
I mean, you were abused.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So again, one of the big ironies is that all these people who call Jews like me self-loathing, call people like you anti-Semites, this came from, it was founded by people who really did internalize anti-Semitism. They had a lot of contempt for Jews who spoke Yiddish, Jews who were religious. They wanted to create the quote unquote new Jew, and the new Jew was strong and bold and,
aggressive. Doesn't take any shit from anybody.
Right, exactly. Belligerent, macho. And that was based on the idea that people who, were killed in the Holocaust went to the slaughter like lambs. If you survived, you were also a sellout and suspicious. I mean, and it's so rich that none of the people who defend Israel, I mean, some people know and they're just cynical, but many of them really don't know. And I actually think this is a really important question in terms of like organizing and the discursive war that we're at, because we have to distinguish between people who are cynical liars and people who I think are really actually up for grabs. And I want to also clarify that this should not be on Palestinians to do. I mean, this is something that should be on everyone. And then I'd say Jews have a special role in this. And I'm not saying this as a like patting ourselves on the back. If anything, I'm saying like, kind of like the thing where white people need to talk to their racist uncles, So I think Jews need to be telling people about this, because I think it's a way to break the spell. Even though for people like you and me, it's about what's happening to Palestinians. But I think that given that Israel's foundational myth and raison d'etre now, in theory, is to protect Jews, never again, the Holocaust, I think once you kind of break that paradigm or show that to be a lie, I think people are a lot more open to seeing the rest of what they're doing.
Absolutely. And, this is obviously a war against Palestinians, but this is a war against all humanity.
Yes.
Like every living human being has a stake in this. And you're very right to point out, there's bombs and missiles and so on, but then there's propaganda and psyops. And that stuff is every bit as important. Yeah. And so demolishing one of the pillars, which is the, Jews are Zionists and Zionists are Jews, is critical. The other one, I think, is that Israel is not our friend. Israel harms the United States on a regular basis. Israel has completely, interestingly enough, the MAGA people, some of them seem to understand that.
Yeah,
Israel has completely corrupted our political system. They've stolen our treasure. I mean, how much money have we given them over the years? They've corrupted our police. A lot of the militarization of the police in the United States is Israeli driven. I don't know if people know that, right?
Yeah.
But that's
Can
a
you
fact.
elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think over 150,000 U.S. police have been taken on a, all expense paid trip. And, cops are like everybody else. They love a vacation in a nice place. Yeah. And they get a free vacation and they learn how to treat American citizens the way the Israelis treat Palestinians. Right. And I've observed police tactics over the decades because I've been around a long time, been a lot of demonstrations. And I've seen them get a whole lot more military and a whole lot more rough. And it looks a whole lot like what they do to Palestinians in Palestine.
Yeah, when they're arresting them, not when they're bombing them, obviously. But it's getting closer to that, I would say, right? Like there's still a distinction, although it does depend on like what ethnicity, race you are here and class you are here, right? Because obviously,
well, I mean, they'll twist the necks of people regardless of race, color, or creed. I mean, I've seen absolute massive brutality. Yeah. And this is influenced by the training that 150, and it's not just like a beat cop that's going over, it's the captain that's going over, it's the chief that's going over. So if it's 150,000 of those guys, they are influencing easily 10 million cops.
Right.
Okay. And unfortunately, cops are kind of like, they're like frat boys, a lot of them, and they learn tricks from the Israelis and they can't wait to use them when they get home.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately the psychology of it. So pillar number one is Judaism is not Zionism. Pillar number two is Israel is not our friend. And pillar that I want to talk about today is there is a different path for the United States. And not only is there a different path, we were on that path under JFK. Right. And nobody seems to know this because it's been written out of the history. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. But you're right. It's a war of words. It's a war of ideas. It's a war of propaganda. We have the truth on our side, but we have to tell the truth as much as we can.
Yeah. We're going to get into JFK and the relationship between France and Israel, because it's hard to understand where, ironically, where Israel is today with its weapons without understanding that. And then we're going to get into JFK. So I guess the first question I want to ask you about, then we'll get into some great videos that you've dug up, is, and just a reminder that it's estimated that they have hundreds of weapons. Some put it as high as 300 nuclear bombs. And can you just talk briefly also about, on a related note, the Sampson option?
Oh, this is so important. We've heard about the Hannibal directive, right? And the Sampson option has been around forever. And there's even a book with that title. And it basically says if Israel gets pushed to the wall, they will try to destroy the entire world. And that's Samson. If people know the old biblical story, I forget, someone cut his hair and he was chained to something and then he pulled the temple. I don't know the whole story, right? But basically it's, hey, if you're going to kill me, I'm going to kill everybody in the room. And if they have as many nuclear weapons as they claim, they could actually make a dent in that, in accomplishing that.
Right. And of course, they also had the whistleblower, Mordechai Vanunu, who exposed the nuclear program, and then he was locked up. And he's still, I think he can't leave the country. I think he can't leave Israel. But yeah, that's a whole other really interesting and quite dramatic story. So, and again, it's just so rich that they have the entire Western world, at least, and many governments around the world saying that the threat is from Iran, right? The threat is from Iran. The threat is not from the country that has the weapons and even has the Sampson option. So one lesser known part of Israel's history is the relationship between Israel and France. And at one point in the mid-50s, the CIA even noted that France was the major weapons supplier to Israel, with the two countries counting on their mutual relationship to help tame, quote, the problems created by North Africa and Middle East disturbances, end quote. And the CIA further detailed the reported help France supplied to Israel's then nascent nuclear program. And the aid didn't stop at energy either, according to the CIA report. Can you talk a little bit about this relationship between Israel and France?
Oh wow, it's a wild one, and it really does start with the reality that France went into Algeria in the early part of the 19th century, killed 1/3 of the population, and turned it into its own personal cash cow. So they've had, and of course Napoleon went to Egypt, right? So France, has had its eye, and of course they've devastated Western Africa. I mean, Morocco. I mean, they're just horrible. They have a long track record of doing evil things. So the relationship with France and Israel in particular is so interesting. Believe it or not, the French supported the Zionist terrorists during the British Mandate.
Of course,
right?
'cause they wanted to fight the French, right? The enemy.
Right,
Like,
it's a chessboard. So the French were pissed off that the English were interfering in Lebanon and Syria, and the French said they'd get back, and the way they got back was by arming and training terrorists in Palestinian Mandate.
Right.
So that's step one. Step two, and this is one that people really don't talk about a lot. The French and the English put the canal, the Suez Canal. Again, the 19th century invention, by the way, funded by the same people that funded sending Zionists to Palestine. It was kickstarted by the Rothschild Bank. Now, Rothschilds, as far as I'm concerned, they could be Jewish, they could be Tibetan, they could be Bolivian, it doesn't really matter. But what they represent is a massive collection of capital. And they literally looked at the world as a chessboard. So one of their chess moves was to put a canal through Egypt. Another was to put Europeans right in the middle of the Levant, right? So what happened when Egypt woke up one day and said, you know what? We don't like the idea of a canal, someone else's canal running through our country, and they appropriated it. They offered to pay for it. There was a war. Did France invade Egypt? No. Did the other partner in the canal's ownership invade Egypt? No. Israel invaded Egypt. So over the Suez Canal. So that's the greatest demonstration of what the role of Israel is. It's a thug. So let's say you're a gangster and you want to deal crack in a particular neighborhood. You don't personally want to go down there and deal the crack. You find some thugs, you send them down there and you put them to work. And when you need them, you call them up and say, I need you to kill somebody. And so that's the relationship. That's been the relationship between Europe and the United States and Israel. Now, sometimes, as in the movie Scarface, the thug, who is the underling, decides he's more important than other people think, and he's going to exert himself. So that's kind of what we have right now with Israel. We have a thug nation. I mean, Zionism is basically a political malign cult that's based on homicide and theft. I mean, that's kind of really what it is, right? And the people that put Israel in place, put the Zionists in place in Israel, liked having those kind of people in place. So what other French things can we say? Well, in gratitude, oh, by the way, this is something people also don't know because they don't know about Algeria. The Algeria story is so important. The Israelis sent advisors and intelligence agents to assist the French during the last round of their genocide, right? There was a genocide that was taking place in Algeria, just as horrible, believe it or not. I mean, they didn't have this, they were dealing with a much larger territory and they didn't have the kind of weapons Israel has, but they were destroying villages, they were putting people in concentration camps, they were destroying agricultural fields, and Israel was part of that. So in gratitude to Israel for all the wonderful things it did for France, they started to provide Israel with nuclear technology. So that's the relationship in a nutshell between Israel and France.
Yeah, it's really unreal, and it's just fascinating that as you're pointing out, nobody knows about this and nobody talks about it. What was Kennedy's position on Israel's nuclear program?
Oh man, this stuff was buried. It was classified until relatively recently. It was like the holy of holies, the most secret thing that nobody could ever talk about. But the documents exist. I have to tell you, they're in my book. We put the actual texts. We actually took photographs of the actual documents. I mean, this is not a conspiracy theory. This is not, speculation. This is not, we're not talking about files that nobody's ever seen. The files are in the book. You can read them himself. Kennedy was very clear to Ben-Gurion. He said, listen, we got to get into that nuclear research facility you have. We have to do a thorough inspection of it. If not, there's going to be a big problem in your level of support from the United States.
Yes. And what kind of resistance did Kennedy encounter when pushing back?
The usual Zionist bullshit. well, it's not convenient right now, and I mean, they just delay, and they even changed prime ministers. So, I don't know if you noticed, but Ben Gurion left for a while, and they put another guy in. So it's like, you're negotiating with one guy, and suddenly he's out of there, and they bring in another guy.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it was an endless delaying tactic. By the way, the whole issue ended on November 22nd, 1963.
Oh yeah, I wonder why that was.
Well, it's there are a lot of people that wanted Kennedy killed, and CIA. There's the elements of the CIA. By the way, they were not rogue elements, and I hope we may get to talk about that. Nothing rogue about James Jesus Angleton or Allen Dulles, right? Right. That's like calling the CEO of U.S. Steel a rogue element in U.S. Steel. That's absurd. So the CIA wanted him gone. Organized crime wanted him gone. And it's pretty darn clear that there were a lot of people in Israel that wanted him gone. And interestingly enough, the CIA, organized crime, and Zionist criminality worked together and have worked together for decades. But that's something you're not allowed to talk about. But it's a historical fact. It can't be denied. You can try to deny it, but the facts are the facts, and we might get into some of that today too.
Yeah, that would be great. Let's see. You want to get into that now and then go into the Algeria, or do you? I think you're pretty anxious to, understandably, because it's so uncovered. Let's. I think you're what is it, chomping at the bits to talk about the Algeria connection, right?
Well, it explains so much, and we've kind of given away the hint, but still, everybody should watch this video. Look at it.
Right.
We're not going to tell you what it is.
Yes.
Look at it and try to figure out what it is you're looking at.
Okay.
And then there's a reveal at the end. By the way, that's Jackie Kennedy with little John John. Okay, so just pause it for a second. Yeah, there you go. Pause for 1 second. So everybody should try to guess, what was that? All right, and here's the reveal.
This moment of national independence for the people of Algeria, the creation of a great new state, represents the devoted and courageous work of the Algerian people and their leaders, stretching over many years. I congratulate them. I congratulate them as President of the United States, and I congratulate them on behalf of the American people. We too fought for our own independence also. And it cost us many years of bloodshed and tears and work and perseverance. But we finally obtained our independence as you have yours, and we have maintained it as you will yours. It's a particular source of satisfaction to me to express these words of greeting to our friends in Algeria, because I recall speaking some years ago in the Senate of the United States on behalf of independence for Algeria.
So folks, what you saw, I mean, I want to ask this question. Has anybody ever seen such a lavish reception for anybody at the White House ever?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Okay. So what was that, folks? That was October 15th, 1962. That was Ahmed Ben Bella. That was the newly elected president of independent Algeria, the first Algerian to be the head of Algeria since the French invaded it in 1830. Okay, so they invaded in 1830, and I want to repeat, they killed 1/3 of all of Algeria in their first wave of invasion. Now, young John F. Kennedy, when he was a senator from Massachusetts, made this, there was a second war of independence that took place from between 54 and 62, in which 400,000 to 1.5 million Algerians were killed. Civilians. And they, they did the typical stuff, bombing villages, burning villages, rounding people up, putting them in the equivalent of concentration camps, destroying their agricultural resources. And it was a drain the swamp military operation. The idea of, hey, we got all these freedom fighters in Algeria that are causing this trouble. Why don't we just destroy the entire civil infrastructure so they can never trouble us again? And by the way, Israel participated in that. They provided intelligence assets, because they knew a lot about the Middle East. They also trained French Jewish fighters and armed them and so on. So Israel was involved in that battle. So young John F. Kennedy, senator from Massachusetts, gave a long speech to the Senate saying, this is wrong. We think France should stop. We don't think the United States should support this. This helps nobody. Okay. So I have to say something about Noam Chomsky. And I know this is going to seem like I love him. There'd be no me without him. I mean, he was the guy that was explaining all this stuff in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, before the rest of us figured it out. But I feel he made one terrible error, which was to lump JFK with the rest of the elites. And yeah, on a certain level, that's true. But there's two things different about JFK. He was the only guy in the White House, possibly in history, including Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, who had no financial stake in any direction the United States went in. Okay. George Washington owned a lot of land. Abraham Lincoln was actually an attorney for the railroad companies. That's how he made his money. Nobody ever asked how Abraham Lincoln has made his money, right? Kennedy was the only guy whose father was one of the richest men in the world. And, Joseph Kennedy he had a vast Democratic Party network. He was the fifth richest man in the United States. He also knew all about myth making in Hollywood because he was one of the most important financiers in Hollywood. He put John F. Kennedy in position. We would not have seen the Kennedy brothers had it not been for Joseph Kennedy. Not that they weren't talented and ambitious. He paved the way. Okay. And those two men were absolutely independent. They looked at the world through the lens of what is right. What is right for America first, which is what they should do because they're Americans. But they also looked at what is right for the entire world. And Kennedy came to the conclusion was all this coup making and assassination and imperialism and putting our heels on the necks of the poor is wrong. And he had this opinion as a young man. There was no political gain for him as a senator from Massachusetts to give a long talk. In fact, it hurt him. Right? Because France was our ally. It was the Cold War and everything. He didn't care. He saw what was right and he spoke up for it. So when de Gaulle finally said, we're out, Algeria had a chance to elect a president, and look at what Kennedy did. That is the greatest honor. It was the color guard, and not just 3 guys with a flag, 20 guys from each of the armed forces, all the generals saluting and everything. And that was a message to the world, but it was also a message to the U.S. military, because Kennedy was a military man and he was very astute. And when you're president, you have to let the troops know what the direction is. So in addition to honoring this man, honoring Algeria, telegraphing to the world that we're out of the coup business, we're out of this, he was also telegraphing to the military, we're not fighting Arab speaking people. And by the way, you got to say Arab speaking. When people say Arab, it's ridiculous. It's like saying African, like these countries are different. They're different people.
Arabic speaking, right? Arabic speaking, excuse me, Arabic speaking people. We are not their enemies. We don't want to be their enemies. We want to be their friends. And we want to be the friend of the impulse to liberty all over the world. We're going to compete. And he said this in various speeches. We're going to compete and we're going to compete hard, but we're going to compete fair. And Chomsky would say, well, he's a Cold Warrior. And it's true. He was a Cold Warrior. But his way of fighting the Cold War was to let's be better than the Soviets. Let's show a better way. Let's show the best of us. So I'm afraid a lot of the left has written off Kennedy as an unimportant person. But when you see this, and this is just a narrow slice of what he did the same thing in Indochina. He gave or not unimportant. I wouldn't say unimportant, but not a departure from regular presidential foreign policy.
Gotcha.
Right.
But in fact,
because they would say he's important, they just basically don't want to they would say he doesn't deserve credit for ABC. I mean,
I've heard Chomsky say, and everybody's entitled to their opinion. He's not particularly interested in who killed Kennedy or why, because he's just one of the bunch. But it's not quite accurate, again, we've just seen this demonstration of Kennedy putting his money where his mouth is. And again, no personal gain for him. There's no Algerian lobbying group that would funnel money into his campaign. He did this to do the right thing. All right. And a year later, he was dead. Okay. So during the summer of 1963, he and his brother, who's the Attorney General, were fighting Israel on two fronts. One, Kennedy personally, JFK personally, he wrote the letters, or they were signed with his name. He wrote the letters, the telegrams, the cables, and we have all the correspondence, which was classified until just a few years ago, which is really weird. He was telling the Israelis, you cannot have a nuclear weapon, period. End of story. We need to see your labs. We need to see what you're doing. Now, on the brother side, Robert Kennedy, who was Attorney General, was telling the Israeli lobbyist groups, you got to register just like everybody else. England registers, Canada registers, Australia registers. You've got to register too. And of course, they were using the endless delay tactics. So there was a secret war, and I call it secret. I call it a battle. It was secret because nobody knew about it at the time, and nobody knew about it as recently as the dawn of the 21st century. All right, so it was secret. I'm calling it a battle because it wasn't an all-out war, but it was a battle. It was serious, and each side had a position, and each side was digging in deep. And who was he fighting against? He was fighting against, in my opinion, extremist elements in Israel. Which, by the way, I don't know how many people know this. Did you know that Hannah Arendt, and am I pronouncing that right? Sometimes I read things that I don't know how to pronounce. The great sociologist
Arendt,
who spoke against fascism. She and Einstein wrote a letter to the New York Times in the 1940s saying, hey, these Zionist extremists are terrible. You shouldn't.
We shouldn't. They even said fascists. Yeah.
Yeah. We should not invite them into our country to speak.
Right.
Now that's something I would bang that drum every day of the week.
Yeah.
So here we are. And of course, Kennedy died. And as soon as he died, his brother was neutered. And who came in? And this is really important. LBJ came in. What do we know about LBJ? We know that one of his dearest family members, his aunt, and everybody, sometimes you love your aunt, you love your uncle because maybe they're nicer to you than your own parents, He had an aunt like that. She was a Christian Zionist.
I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. And she wasn't any old Christian Zionist. She was a national leader of the Christian Zionist movement. He also had a great friendship. Her name was Matilda Krim. Anybody ever heard that name? Okay, check this out. Arthur Krim was a Hollywood guy, made a ton of money. Like he owned a townhouse in the Upper East Side, and he's one of these super rich guys. And Kennedy got fundraising from him. In fact, there's a famous picture of Kennedy with Marilyn Monroe. There's only one. It was taken place at Krim's townhouse. So they were close friends. I mean, not close friends. They were alliances, and he raised money. He also raised money for LBJ. His wife, Matilda Krim, had been a member of the Irgun. She was a terrorist. Okay. And now, how close was LBJ to this particular couple? They had a bedroom in the White House that was theirs. That's how often they visited the White House. They were frequent guests at his ranch, and they built a house within the vicinity of his ranch so he could helicopter over to their house when they wanted to hang out. So LBJ was kind of on the Zionist side, I think. And weirdly, this is never talked about. Now, when you hear about who killed JFK, we're allowed to say it's the CIA. We're allowed to say it's organized crime. Lately, the last 10 or 15 years, people are talking about LBJ. In fact, there are several books that say LBJ was the man that put it all together, which is nonsense. But he certainly had to be involved for it to be pulled off. The one element that's never, ever talked about in this triumvirate of LBJ, organized crime, and CIA are Zionist elements. You're not allowed to say this. And I'll tell you this, if you are a professional assassination scholar, and you can make a living doing that. You can write books, you can be at conferences, you can do all kinds of stuff. If you dare to utter a word about this, you're out. Right. You're not going to make any money. Now, luckily, I don't make a living as a JFK assassination scholar, but you're not allowed to talk about this. So let's look at the cross-fertilization.
And to hear that full interview with Ken McCarthy, please do join our Patreon at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Please do like the stream. That's a free way to support the show, to get the word out. Please do subscribe by hitting subscribe and then the bell so you never miss one of our streams. And we will see you next week. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Okay, I'm down. You got rivers, man. You got rivers, man. Okay, I'm down.